into the sea! Now! Whoa!
Those two words hang in the cold night air like a death sentence, and that is exactly what they are. Zara hears them. She hears them clearly, even over the roar of the Onyx River rushing below her feet, even over the thundering of her own heartbeat, even over the sound of her own ragged, desperate breathing. She turns slowly, her bare feet scraping against the wet mud at the river's edge, and she looks at the girl standing just a few feet away. The girl she grew up with, the girl she shared meals with, the girl she once braided hair with on lazy palace afternoons, and she cannot believe what she sees. Zara stands with her arms folded, her silk robe untouched by the cold, her eyes empty of everything except contempt. There is no hesitation in her face, no flicker of guilt, no trace of the sisterhood they once pretended to share, just a cold, satisfied stillness, as if she has been waiting for this moment her entire life. Zara! Zara's voice breaks. Mira, please, look at me. I am your sister. You are nothing to me, Mira says quietly. You never were. Behind Zara, two strong hands grip her arms. Remy, Bella, and Cora stand in a half circle, blocking every path back to the forest. Remy won't meet Zara's eyes. Cora's hands are trembling, but Bella watches with the calm efficiency of someone carrying out an errand, not a murder. Please, Zara twists against the grip holding her. Please, I am begging you. Whatever I did, whatever you think I took from you, I will give it back. I will renounce everything. I will leave the kingdom. I will never come back. I will disappear and you will never hear my name again. Just please, don't do this. Mira tilts her head slightly, the way someone does when they find something mildly amusing. You think this is about what you took, she says. Zara, you exist. That is the offense. You were born, and the moment you were born, my father looked at you like you are the sun itself. I have spent my entire life being compared to you and found wanting in my own home by my own father. Her voice tightens just barely, the only crack in the marble. That ends tonight. Mira, your father loves you. Throw her in, Mira says again, louder this time, her eyes cutting away from Zara as if she is already irrelevant. And then the hands shove. Zara has one breath, one single terrible breath before the cold water swallows her whole. The Onyx River is not gentle, it is ancient and fast and merciless, and it takes her immediately, pulling her under with a force that feels almost intentional, almost personal, as if the river itself has been told what to do. She fights. Of course she fights. Her arms claw through the current, her lungs burn, her eyes open wide in the black water, searching for any light, any surface, any way up. But the river is stronger, and the four girls standing on the bank watch until the current carries her around the bend and she disappears into the darkness. Then Mira smooths the front of her robe, turns back toward the forest path, and begins walking home. Clean yourselves up, she says over her shoulder. We have a coronation to prepare for. To understand how a night like this was ever possible, you have to go back to the beginning, back to the kingdom of Ozal, a land of red earth and tall Iroko trees, ruled by King Daro, a man as fair as he was strong, as gentle as he was commanding. For 12 years, King Daro and his first wife, Queen Vesta, tried and failed to have a child. The palace whispered, the chiefs grew impatient, and Queen Vesta, who entered the palace as a beautiful and ambitious young woman, grew harder with every passing year, her love for her husband slowly calcifying into something closer to desperation. When King Daro finally took a second wife, a quiet, soft-spoken woman named Sela, from a village at the edge of the kingdom, Queen Vesta did not weep. She simply went cold, and she stayed cold. Both women conceived within the same season. Queen Vesta gave birth first to a daughter she named Mira, loud, fierce, and hungry from the first breath. Weeks later, Sela gave birth to a daughter she named Sela. But Sela did not survive the delivery. She bled quietly through the night and was gone by morning, leaving behind just a small, sleeping infant and a grief that would settle permanently into the king's chest like a stone. King Daro raised both girls. He tried, genuinely and visibly, to love them equally, but there was something about Zara, her mother's gentleness living on in her face, in the way she spoke to servants, in the way she listened when elders talked, that made it impossible for him to be neutral. He did not love Mira less. He simply loved Zara in a way that was visible to everyone, and that visibility became a wound that Queen Vesta never let heal. Mira grew up knowing the wound was there, and she learned early to press it. She was given everything: tutors, jewels, the finest clothes, the loudest celebrations on her birthday, and still it was never enough, because what she wanted was not things. What she wanted was to be chosen, to be the one her father's eyes softened for, to be the one the palace staff whispered about with admiration rather than the one they tolerated with careful, practiced neutrality. But she didn't know, not yet, that King Daro had made a decision that would change everything. 3 months before the night at the Onyx River, the king had fallen ill. Not gravely, not irreversibly, but enough that the chiefs began calling for a regent to be named. Enough that the question of succession crept out of the shadows and into every corridor of the palace. And King Daro, lying in his bed with the weight of his kingdom pressing on his chest, had called both daughters to him and looked at each for a long, searching moment. Then he called his council, and he had named Zara. What happened in the weeks that followed, what that decision ignited inside Mira and her mother, is a story of how love curdled into something unrecognizable. But the river does not know any of that. The river only knows what it was given. And what it was given on that cold and moonless night was a girl who deserved none of it. But the river, as it turns out, was not the end of Zara's story. It was only the beginning. The palace learns of Zara's disappearance by dawn. Not the truth of it, not the cold hands, not the river, not Mira's voice cutting through the night air like a blade. What the palace learns is the story Mira and her mother have carefully constructed between the hours of midnight and sunrise. Zara, they say, went walking alone by the Onyx River. She was always doing that, always wandering off by herself, always too dreamy and distracted for her own good. It was an accident, a tragedy, a terrible, heartbreaking accident that has left them all devastated. Mira even weeps. She stands in the great hall of the palace the following morning, her eyes red and swollen, her voice trembling just enough to be convincing, and she tells the gathered chiefs and servants and palace guards that she cannot believe her beloved sister is gone, that she would give anything to have her back, that the kingdom has lost something irreplaceable. It is, without question, the finest performance of her life. But in the private chambers of Queen Vesta, behind closed doors and drawn curtains, there are no tears. There is only the sharp, satisfied energy of 2 women who believe they have finally won. Queen Vesta moves through the room with a lightness she has not carried in years, her back straight, her chin lifted, her eyes bright with the kind of relief that only comes from removing something that has long been in your way. "It is done," she says simply. Mira sits at the edge of the bed, and for just a moment, just one flickering, almost imperceptible moment, something crosses her face that is not triumph, something quieter, something that might, in another life, have been called guilt. But Queen Vesta sees it and moves quickly. "Do not," her mother says, her voice low and firm, "do not do that to yourself. She was standing between you and everything you deserve. What we did was necessary." Mira looks at her mother for a long moment. Then the flicker is gone, and she nods. King Daro does not perform his grief. he drowns in it. When the news reaches him, he goes very still in a way that frightens everyone who sees it. Not the stillness of shock, but the stillness of a man whose body has simply decided to stop cooperating with the world. He does not cry immediately. He does not speak. He sits in the chair by his window and stares out at the courtyard where Zara used to walk in the early mornings, barefoot on the warm stone, stopping to speak to every servant she passed by name. And he sits there so long that his attendants begin to exchange nervous glances behind his back. When the tears finally come, 3 days later, they come without warning and without end. He weeps in the middle of a council meeting. He weeps at the dinner table. He weeps in the corridors at night when he thinks no one can hear him, his hand pressed against the wall for support, his shoulders shaking with the kind of grief that has no bottom. The chiefs are sympathetic, but practical. The kingdom still needs a regent. The decision still needs to be made. And now, with Zara gone, the choice appears to have made itself. Queen Vesta makes sure of that. She moves through the palace with quiet efficiency, speaking to chiefs, arranging meetings, reminding everyone, gently, always gently, that Mira has always been the firstborn, always been prepared for this role, always ready to serve. She plants seeds of urgency in every conversation. She waters them with flattery and patience. And within 2 weeks of Zara's disappearance, the council formally recommends Mira as regent. King Darrow, hollowed out by grief and too exhausted to fight, signs the decree. Mira watches him sign it with steady eyes. Meanwhile, deep in the forest beyond the eastern edge of Ozal, in a compound of healing herbs and quiet fires and the kind of silence that feels intentional, an old woman named Elder Norma is doing something remarkable. She is keeping Zara alive. The river had carried Zara 3 miles downstream before depositing her, barely breathing, barely a pulse, her body cold and blue and broken, on a muddy bank not far from Elder Norma's compound. It was one of her young apprentices who found her at first light, who ran back screaming, who dragged the elder out of her morning prayers to come and see. Norma had knelt beside the girl, pressed 2 fingers to her neck, and felt the faintest, most stubborn thread of life still holding on. "She is not ready to go," the old woman said, "and neither am I ready to let her go." When Zara finally opened her eyes on a quiet Tuesday morning in the 4th month, she said nothing for a long time. She simply looked at the ceiling of the small mud-walled room and breathed in, out, as if relearning the basic agreement between her body and the world. Then she turned her head and looked at Elder Norma, who was sitting beside her, waiting. "My sister did this," Zara said. Her voice was barely a whisper, rough and cracked from disuse. But there was something in it, not rage, not yet, something far more dangerous, clarity. Norma met her eyes and nodded once slowly. "I know, child." Zara looked back at the ceiling. "Tell me everything that has happened." And over the days that followed, as her strength slowly returned, as she learned to sit up, and then to stand, and then to walk the compound without leaning on the walls, the full shape of what had been done to her and what had been taken assembled itself in her mind like a verdict being read aloud. Zara stood at the edge of Elder Norma's compound one evening, looking out toward the direction of the palace, the last light of the sun turning everything copper and gold. Her jaw was set, her eyes were dry, her hands hanging at her sides, very still. She was not the same girl the river had swallowed 6 months ago. That girl had begged, that girl had pleaded and trembled and called out to a sister who had already decided she was nothing. This Zara was done begging. She turned back to Elder Norma. "When is the coronation?" The old woman smiled, not warmly, but with the deep satisfaction of someone who has been waiting for exactly this question. 3 weeks, she said. Zara nodded slowly. 3 weeks, just enough time. Then I need to be ready, because I am coming home. The morning of the coronation arrives like a celebration that has forgotten it is built on a grave. The kingdom of Ozar has been decorated for weeks, bright fabrics draped across market stalls, drummers practicing in the courtyards, children running through the streets with painted faces, vendors selling roasted corn and sweet palm wine at every corner. To the ordinary people of Ozal, this is a day of joy, a new regent, a new beginning. The grief of losing Princess Zara has not fully healed, but life, as it always does, has pressed forward. Inside the palace, Mira stands before a tall mirror, while 3 attendants arrange her coronation robe across her shoulders. The fabric is deep burgundy and gold, the finest the kingdom's weavers have ever produced. Her hair is pinned with ivory combs, her neck carries the ceremonial beads that have been passed down through the royal line for generations. She looks, by every external measure, like a queen, but her hands will not stop trembling. She notices it when one of the attendants tries to fasten the clasp at her wrist, and the girl frowns slightly, confused by the unsteadiness. Mira pulls her hand away and holds it flat against her thigh until it stills. She stares at her reflection and tells herself what she has been telling herself for 6 months, that it is over, that Zara is gone, that the river finished what the plant started, that there is nothing left to fear. She almost believes it. Queen Vesta appears in the doorway, resplendent in silver, her eyes sweeping over her daughter with open satisfaction. "It is time," she says. Mira takes one last look at the mirror. Then she turns and walks toward the great hall, and with every step she takes, she looks more and more like a woman trying to outrun something she can feel gaining on her. The great hall is filled to capacity. Chiefs in full ceremonial dress line both sides of the aisle. Palace staff crowd the back walls. A contingent of village elders sit in the front row, their faces solemn and formal. And at the very front, seated on an elevated chair that has been carried in specially for him, is King Daro. He looks older than he did 6 months ago. Not just tired, older in the way that grief ages people, stealing something cellular and irreplaceable. His eyes, once warm and quick, are slower now, sitting deeper in his face. But he is present. He insisted on being present. Whatever else has been taken from him, he will not miss this. The ceremony begins. The head chief rises and begins the formal recitation. The history of the kingdom, the lineage of the royal family, the weight and responsibility of the title being conferred. His voice fills the hall, deep and ceremonial. Mira walks the aisle. The drums begin their slow, sacred rhythm. And then the doors at the back of the hall open. Not dramatically, not with a bang or a crash. They simply open. The way doors open when someone with absolute purpose puts their hand on them and walks through. And the figure standing in the doorway, backlit by the full morning sun pouring in from the courtyard behind her, is so unexpected, so impossible, so completely and utterly wrong according to everything Mira and her mother have constructed over the past 6 months, that it takes the entire room a full 3 seconds to process what they are seeing. 3 seconds of absolute silence. And then, someone in the back of the hall whispers a single word. Zara. It moves through the room like fire through dry grass. Zara, Zara, Zara. The whisper becomes a murmur. The murmur becomes a roar. And then the entire hall is on its feet. Chiefs and servants and elders and guards. Every voice tangled together in shock and disbelief. And something that keeps climbing rapidly toward joy. Zara walks forward. She is wearing white, simple, clean, deliberate white, and she carries nothing in her hands. No weapon, no declaration, no prop of any kind. She does not need one. Her face carries everything. 6 months of near death and slow healing and quiet, burning, unshakable resolve have done something to her bearing that no palace tutoring ever could. She moves through the parting crowd like a tide moves, inevitable, unhurried, unstoppable. At the front of the hall, King Daro rises from his chair. He rises slowly, his old body uncertain, his eyes locked on his daughter's face as if she might dissolve if he blinks. His mouth opens. Nothing comes out. His hands reach forward, shaking, and when Zara reaches him and takes those hands in both of hers, the king makes a sound that has no name. Something between a sob and a cry and the specific, devastating exhale of a man who has been holding his breath for 6 months. Baba, Zara says softly. Just that. Just the one word. And King Daro weeps. Mira has not moved. She stands at the front of the aisle, 6 feet from the throne. Her coronation robe suddenly feels like a costume. Her ivory comb suddenly feels like a lie. Her face has gone the color of ash. Beside her, Queen Vesta's carefully composed expression is cracking at every seam, her eyes darting between Zara and the crowd and the exit with the frantic calculation of someone watching a wall collapse toward them. Remy has already started crying. Cora looks as though she might faint. Bella, to her credit, stays very still. But her stillness is the stillness of someone who has just understood that there is no version of this moment that ends well for her. Zara releases her father's hands gently, turns to face the hall, and speaks. Her voice is clear and steady and carries to every corner of the room without effort, without anger, without theatrics. She does not scream. She does not accuse wildly. She simply tells the truth. Every detail in order, without embellishment. The conversation in the palace the night Mira learned of the regency decision, the plan that followed, the walk to the onyx rearer, the hands on her arms, the words, throw her in, and the cold black water closing over her head. She names every person, Mira, Queen Vesta, Remy, Bella, Cora. She names them all. The hall is so quiet during her account that the distant sound of the coronation drummers still playing obliviously in the courtyard outside feels almost absurd. When she finishes, she does not ask for anything. She does not demand punishment or beg for justice. She simply stands and lets the truth sit in the room and do what truth does when it is finally fully spoken. It does not take long. The head chief turns to the royal guards. The royal guards look at King Daro. King Daro still trembling, still seeing with eyes that are no longer soft, eyes that are seeing perhaps for the first time the full shape of what his household has contained all these years. Take them, the king says, quietly, finally. Mira breaks. The composure she has maintained for 6 months through the planning and the execution and the performance of grief and the weeks of political maneuvering shatters completely the moment the guards move toward her. She reaches for her mother. Queen Vesta reaches back. For one brief, almost pitiable moment, they cling to each other. And in that clinging, there is something almost human, the terrified core of 2 people who chose destruction and are now receiving it. But the guards are patient, and the hall is watching, and there is nowhere to go. Remy confesses before she even reaches the holding chamber, the words pouring out of her in a torrent of guilt and relief that she has clearly been suppressing for months. Bella says nothing, but signs the written account without argument. Cora, weeping so hard she can barely speak, asks over and over again if Zara is truly alive, as if the sight of her is still not enough to make it real. She is. She is truly, fully, irreversibly alive. Queen Vesta is stripped of her title and expelled from the palace grounds before sundown. Mira and the 3 accomplices are taken to the royal holding chambers to await formal judgment from the council. The burgundy coronation robe is folded and removed. The ivory combs are taken. The ceremonial beads, the ones passed down through the royal line for generations, are lifted from Mira's neck by the head chief's own hands and carried, carefully, to where Zara is standing. The head chief holds them out. The hall holds its breath. Zara looks at the beads for a long moment. Then she looks out at the crowd, at her father, at the chiefs, at the servants who raised her, at the faces of people who mourned her and are now looking at her with something so close to wonder it is almost difficult to receive. She reaches out and accepts them. The drums outside, as if on cue, shift into a rhythm that has not been heard since a coronation, full and deep and jubilant, rolling across the courtyard and into the great hall and out through the open doors into the streets of Ozal, where people are already beginning to understand that something extraordinary has just happened inside the palace. King Daru lives for 8 more months after that day, long enough to watch his daughter hold her first council meeting with a steadiness that silences the most skeptical chief in the room, long enough to see the kingdom soften under her leadership the way earth softens after rain, long enough to die in his own bed, in his own time, with his daughter's hand in his and a peace on his face that has been absent for years. He dies, by every account, a happy man. Mira spends her years in the holding chambers with nothing but time and silence and the slow, relentless company of her own choices. The servants who pass her door sometimes report hearing her talking to herself in the night. Whether she is haunted by guilt or simply by memory, no one can say for certain. But the girl who once stood on the bank of the Onyx River and watched her sister disappear into the current does not sleep easily. That much everyone agrees on. Zara never speaks of her publicly again. She does not need to. What part of this story shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments. The river did not take Zara. It returned her. And that is the quiet truth at the heart of this story, that kindness is not weakness and gentleness is not the same as fragility. Zara survived not because she was the strongest or the most powerful, but because she was real in a way that Mira, for all her scheming, never managed to be. The throne Mira hungered for so desperately that she was willing to drown her own sister for it, that throne never belonged to her. You cannot rule with hands that are already full of someone else's harm. What you reach for through destruction will always slip through your fingers. But what is truly yours, no river, no rival, no act of cruelty in the world can take it from you. If you think you've seen it all, wait till you watch the story of the woman who turned her stepdaughter into a goat. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notification, share it with your friends, and drop where you're watching from in the comment section below.